Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Greatness Glory podcast. Today, I have my new friend Paul Fredric on the show. We want to go over a few spiritual, mystical things. Hey, Paul, how are you?
Hey, Isaac, I'm great. It's great to be on your show. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Thanks for joining. Would you mind give me an introduction about yourself? How did you get into the religion and spirituality and things like that? A little bit of history.
Yeah, I mean, it's a long story, but I'll try and condense it down. Um, I was I was born into I guess the Christian tradition. From my family. My father was kind of a existentialist. He had like kind of moved to the West Coast and picked up existentialist ideas and stuff in the '60s and some other comparative religion type influences and stuff like that. So I got kind of a good education from my father on different sorts of ideas outside of Christianity, which are our immediate family around us. And this is in Missouri, where I grew up. Um,
Mm.
had. And then my father, he died when I was young, when I was 9 years old, and so I kind of got introduced very early on to the reality of death and loss and things like that, and it was very hard for me at the time because we'd been very close. So I was kind of on my own at that point, and ended up, from there, sort of gravitating into occultism and things of that nature. And as I got older, I looked more into comparative religion, and then got very involved in Setianism, which is a based on like ancient Egyptian magic and systems and
Mm.
stuff like that. Um, and one thing that really got me going in a more serious direction was some of the teachings from the Gurdjieff work. I eventually discovered Gurdjieff and stuff, and one of the key takeaways from that is I developed a practice of meditation. I started a regular, consistent practice of meditation, and that really, in a nutshell, and some other things, the idea of like self observation, increasing your awareness of yourself and trying to see yourself through light. And that was the point at which I started to really experience some changes. And I'd mentioned when we were talking earlier, I published a book recently called Second Awakening, where I talk a little bit more in depth about my experiences with this. So that's where I am, just as far as my background on things.
Okay, cool. And then, what is your book about?
So um, after I had been engaging in a regular meditation practice for a couple of years. And before that, I'd been like a half-ass meditator, I would say. Like I'd meditate in response to stress, or meditate because I'm with some people who like to meditate and I'm following along with it. But after I got to a point where I owned it, and I internalized it, and I just started doing it regularly. Eventually, I reached a point where I had an experience
Mm.
of kind of an unlocking of some new capacities, and it led to a lot of, just like overnight. I mean, it changed me, it changed my personality, it changed my desires,
Mm.
which is like, how does that happen? And overnight, my diet changed. I quit drinking. I started sleeping like regular hours. Prior to this in my life, I had been very like, I drank a lot. I had been eating poorly. I had ulcerative colitis also for about 10, 15 years. And so I gained a lot of weight. I was on all these drugs, you know. I was
Yeah.
taking Humira shots, and stuff. And I'd really reached a point, a certain point in there where I'd almost considered suicide,
Yeah.
from the ulcerative colitis because it was so damaging. But the drugs got me back to kind of a normal state. But once I had this experience, it's like all these things changed, my diet changed, and then, a couple of years later, it's like I don't have colitis anymore, and I'm fully healthy. But when this experience happened, I I just kept wondering what the hell is this? What happened? There must be some precedent, and I started to remember that when I was younger in college, I had read this book,
Yeah.
Secret of the Golden Flower, which
Yeah.
is a Taoist, a Taoist manual, that I'd read when I was in college, and kind of said, "Oh yeah," when I was in, collecting wisdom on occultism and esoterica, and I read it, and I'm like, "Oh yeah, yeah, higher consciousness. I know, yeah, I'm all about that," and I just moved on from there. And wasn't even, I realize now, I was not even really cognizant of the fact that this book is a manual about meditation. I just took, when I first read it, I just took the, meditation references as, oh yeah, that's optional. You can do that. But I'm, accomplishing these things just by thinking about it, just by wanting to do it, I'm somehow like accomplishing it. And after I'd had this experience, I went back and read it. It was alive with like new meaning. It was addressing everything first that I had been doing. I mean, it says you have to do a meditation every day, for, half hour to an hour. And you have to do it for in the book, they call it the 100 days. And then after the 100 days, a change occurs and the primordial spirit comes to dwell within. And to me, that 100 days means, well, you just need to practice this until you forget how many days you've been do you do a daily practice, and eventually you lose your cognizance of how long you've been doing it, and you're no longer like watching the clock, like how much longer do I have to do this meditation, or how many more days do I have to like do this. You're not even thinking about it anymore, and when you
Yeah.
get to that point, I think it starts to unlock some other, I mean, there's physiological things that happen, and there's spiritual things that happen, but a lot of it has to do with the growth of, um, what what is sometimes called the subtle body, what is sometimes called the astral body, and a connection in the solar plexus. And of course, then, so my book deals mainly with my experiences, and I use the, um Secret of the Golden Flower as a launch pad to discuss some of the other things, but it
Yeah.
takes you into this experience. Is universal. That's the next thing you come to. It's universal. It's not just a Taoist secret. This is known in the Vedantic Sanatana Dharma. This is like talked about in Zoroastrianism. It's in all these other systems using different language. Even Christianity, you can see the fragments of this teaching goes back to this
Mm.
idea of the Holy Spirit comes to dwell, and things like that. So
Mm. Okay. Actually, not sure if a lot of people know that secret of golden flower. I think you're talking about that microcosmic orbit meditation where you circulate your consciousness and energy. It actually originally comes from the yogic traditions, Kriya Yoga for especially.
hmm
And one thing that is actually a shock to many people that don't know it is that we have these 18 siddhas, are like highly evolved beings. They go back to South India, especially. And one of them, I think, is Bogarnath, who was the person who brought those teachings to China, and is like actually known to be the founder of Taoism in a way. But a lot of people
Mm-hmm.
don't know that the same technique been practiced for like thousands of years, especially in the Kriya Yoga, where you work with the chakras and energy centers, and the circulation of the energy and consciousness is actually kind of like to the circulation of the planets like sun and moon, and the evolution of the consciousness that happens naturally in millions of years. And then Kriya Yoga philosophy says if you can do it in your microcosm, which is inside, the evolution will happen like hundreds of times, thousands of times much faster. It's like when you do it. So I study a lot of yogic spirituality since when I was teenager, and I know mostly about those. But I practiced some of those microcosmic stuff in some qigong and things that I did along with my martial arts.
Mm-hmm.
So I know what you're talking about. Am I right?
Yeah, no, I think you're right on. So yeah, Kriya Yoga, that also comes down to Yogananda and Sri Yukteswar, I think are like more, I think Yogananda is like the one who brought it to America. Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, it's what I've determined is that, every system, like, has a specific language about talking about this, about how you enact it, and you kind of need we kind of need that specificity to go in and start actually doing these things and applying them. But at the same time, and I think you touched on this, there's a general movement, right? There's a movement of combining higher with the lower, and mixing them. It's like that microcosmic orbit of like moving around, is also mixing and combining, and in an alchemical sort of process to create something new within us, and to awaken something new within us. Um, and while we're talking about that, I think that you see this in the esoteric sort of significance of the idea of like an immaculate conception, which is an idea in Christianity and the Gospels, but it's also an idea with Krishna. And one of the possible interpretations of that is the idea of by this this spirit descending on someone, in these cases like a mother, right? And maybe this is like it represents a cosmic mother, but by this Holy Spirit descending, and by the passions or love, even in a sexual sense, being retained inside rather than spilled outwards, retained inside, then that creates a new body, a subtle body, or a astral body, or another
Mm.
state of consciousness. And that's the sense in which these stories that we have about these messengers from beyond, specifically thinking of Jesus and Krishna, that these stories, at one time it's a story about a teacher who did all who did all these things, but it's also a story about how someone creates a higher consciousness within them, how they create Krishna consciousness within them, or Christ consciousness, or whatever terminology you want to apply to that.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, speaking of some of the religious traditions and Christianity, and we mentioned Zoroastrianism before when we were talking. What do you think about the difference of the mainstream religions, especially, I believe, Abrahamic religions, compared to real core of it, spirituality, real authentic spirituality? Because as you know, and I talk about this a lot, the mainstream religion, it has a totally different purpose rather than spiritual awakening and like self-realization.
Yeah. So, this is, Gurdjieff talks about this, how, like um, every teacher, every messenger from beyond, like, it's like the second or third generation after that teacher is gone, we get to a point where there's no one who had the direct teaching anymore, and so
Exactly.
then
Yeah.
people start. So then, and what they don't understand a lot of times is when the teacher said something to them, that was just for them, right? That was just for you, right? When you asked the right question, and he told you something, it wasn't a universal rule to follow. So eventually what you have generations later is you have people who don't really understand that, haven't gone through that process themselves, and so they just make a rule book for everyone to follow. And really, the way, I just kind of call it the way. I found, I'm sure you're familiar with the term Sanatana Dharma.
Yes.
Um, so one of the translations I saw that is eternal order. Um, and that was by Ravi Ravindra. His translation of the Bhagavad Gita, he translates that as eternal order. And I thought that is just such a profound way of stating what I see it is, and if I'm seeking to follow anything, it's that. Um,
Yeah.
and and beyond, but in that sense, though, not in the sense of I want to, you know, the trappings of different cultures have a meaning and a purpose, right? There's a purpose to them, but at the same time, the culture that we're raised in is always going to have more power to us because it's just ingrained in our psyche, right? It's like
Right.
something that we can't change that without without fucking up other things even worse in our psyche. So what I aim to do is to try and get to that eternal order or cosmic truth that's behind um all of these systems. And are you familiar with Gopi Krishna?
Yes.
So he wrote some books in the 60s, and he's one of the big writers on Kundalini. And he's like, I really related to his experience a lot because he just discovered it like accidentally, right? He was just
Mm.
meditating a lot, and then he had this experience, and then he went on this long journey of trying to find out about it. And one of the things that he says he discovered is most of the temples and ashrams and stuff in India they couldn't really tell him anything about it. And he's like, what's the deal with it? Why doesn't anyone know about this? So one of the things that he says is that when you look at all the religions deeply enough, you see the the footprints of the cult of Kundalini. What he calls the cult of Kundalini is like behind them all. But what's happened eventually is there's people in charge of the religion
Yeah.
who don't know about that, who don't understand it, or they say it's a symbol of this or it's a symbol of that. It's like some lesson about how you should behave, and they interpret it in a different way. So it becomes lost. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that all of the great religions are worthless and we should you know, you know, fight against them. We just understand that they are what they are. And when you go back to that eternal order, that eternal ancient order, that system, that way, people come to it because of a calling, right? Because they feel a call, they experience a call to it, so they come to it. And it's rather than they're grown up to it and they're taken by it, right? So that's what
Yeah.
the great religions do. They come and take people, right? They dragoon and drag everyone, try to drag as many people into them as they can, and a lot of them are, not all of them, but some of them are kind of in competition with each other to drag in people and it gets all tied up in politics and stuff like that too.
Mm.
So I found that's something that we learn to, tolerate and appreciate as we may. I appreciate the work of the Gothic cathedrals and things like that. It's like, freaking amazing. But at the same time, my my calling is for something deeper that's behind it. Does that make sense? What do
Okay.
you think?
Yeah, yeah. You mentioned a few good things actually. My main thing that I studied deeply and I still study is actually Sanatana Dharma, which is by mistake called Hinduism. Anyways, and I actually recently recorded some video on my YouTube, which I'm planning to do more. It's called um, Myths About Hinduism, and I love the idea of Sanatana Dharma. Actually, it's they say Sanatana Dharma is mother of all religions because it's not a religion in that sense that like a man created it or something. It's more about the eternal laws of nature, universe, and uh, obviously, as you mentioned, things get like diluted after some generations and people add their own things to it or they give it different like shape and colors, but in the original way Sanatana Dharma is basically not like a religion in that way. It's just like about the laws of universe, like the law of karma and so on. And like you mentioned Kundalini, some people think Kundalini is like a Hindu yogic thing or something like that. It's a pretty ignorant way to put it because it's your own inner energy, and any spiritual advancement, whether you know what is Kundalini or whether you ever heard that term, it's dependent on Kundalini in some ways because it's all about evolution of consciousness. Actually, recently I came to know about this guy. His name is Ishak Bento, and he has such an amazing study about the Kundalini and evolution and nervous system. He very
Mm,
scientifically explains things that the evolution and achieving like a higher consciousness and experiencing extrasensory stuff and all those things are all just a state of evolution of your nervous system and brain. That was one of the good things that explains Kundalini in some scientific way. So it's definitely true. Like if you study, for example, the works of Swami Satyananda Saraswati, one of the gurus that I appreciate a lot, he's not alive anymore, but he wrote a lot of things on science of Kundalini and explain it in a scientific manner. Like in one place, he explains, okay, awakening of this chakra means awakening of this part of your brain. So it's all about evolution in many ways, about the nervous system and so on. But the other thing that I wanted to discuss, which you mentioned, is that a lot of these mainstream religious teachings, and I talk about this a lot, they actually intentionally or unintentionally they distort the teachings and people get confused and they don't want to question things because some religions even told people that, oh, if you question this or question God or question the religious teachings, you're going to go to hell and things like that. And I think all of the issues of humanity, whether religious or other stuff, obviously ignorance is root cause of all issues in all spiritual traditions. I think all of the issues goes back to lack of discrimination and not questioning, because like
mm-hmm.
as human beings we were not supposed to just get an intellectual capability and just put it in the closet and just be a blind follower.
Mm-hmm.
So questioning things is very important, I think, for some people that are just think, okay, this is what the truth is. I'm just gonna pray to God and do some fasting or whatever, and then when I die, I go to heaven or whatever. But to my understanding, and with over 20 years of spiritual studies and practices, I think that's just a religious distortion of the truth. And people are happy with that idea just because they have a subconscious fear that, oh, I shouldn't question this. Maybe I'll go to hell or something. So I just wanted to
Hmm.
know what is your idea about this, and I don't know if you were religious before and then you got more into esoteric stuff.
No, 100%. So, when I was very young, and I would go, like, we would go to church when we visited our relatives who were religious, and I'd be introduced to very religious people and the pastor and stuff like that. And I remember, and this is one of the first things that really turned me off on church Christianity, is I would ask a question, and like it's the same question every child asks about this, like why does God allow bad things to happen to good people, you know? If God is all powerful, why is there suffering? And the response that I would always get is you have to have faith and stop asking questions, in so many words. There's a discouragement from asking questions. That's in religion. That is in a lot of our society too. I mean, that's like just sort of there's like this. I think it's a part of the fallen state of humanity, which it might be another discussion, but humanity in its hypnotic sleep state just kind of tries to automatically just stamp out like the question and make people afraid to ask questions, and like you said, like the threat of hell. I mean, and I believe like hell. That's one of the things that is like most certainly been added into the whole teaching that Jesus was talking about way back when, for the
Yeah.
purpose of getting people to stop asking questions and to just uh, stay in line. And it's kind of like the same thing that they want to discourage people from having any experience with their erotic capability with the sexual center, other than for one very narrowly defined form of like procreation. Anything else is just straight to hell for that. And and the reason I think is because there's a huge power in that. Those are the keys to awakening. Having questions, not just questioning ideas, right, and having like and getting new ideas, but there's something about being in the state of question, when you're like, okay, rather than coming up with a question that sounds like a good question, um, rather trying to come into that state of question, and this maybe comes back to a meditation sort of practice possibility, that one wants to be in a state of question, because when I'm in that state of question, that's when there's sort of an opening occurs, right? When
Hmm.
I'm in a state of like answering and telling everyone what I know, that's a very closed state. There's like, character armor up all over that state. And the whole thing that we're trying to do to wake up is to drop that character armor, which wants to keep me, defensive and everything, and open up and be open to be able to receive something higher.
Hmm. Okay.
So yeah, and the idea of a fallen state, I think, is something that appears. So Gurdjieff talks about this a lot. That Gurdjieff sort of philosophy and Ouspensky, they kind of start with this idea, like this is the first thing that you need to understand, is that humanity is asleep, and that you're asleep most of the time when you're walking around doing
Yeah.
things. And I think this is like when people were putting together the Bible and still had a sense of like what a sense of the teaching, right? It's like the Bible, the whole structure of it kind of like indicates this. Starts out, humanity starts out in this, perfection kind of thing. Maybe like the Satya Yuga, I think, in Vedanta, like, when we're tight with God, and then we fall out, right? And we fall out of it. That's all of the Old Testament. That's just man in the fallen state. All of the anger and the wars and all of the like bullshit, and then the Gospels come, and then what Christ is saying, and he says this all over in the Gospels that we're asleep. He uses that term all the time: "A sleeper and must awaken." And most church Christians I've talked to, when you discuss this, they say, "Oh, well, that means death, right?" They're just talking about death. It's impossible that, like the story of Lazarus, who's raised from the dead or something. No, that's literally what happened. So there's a problem in there with like taking everything literally, because it taking everything
Yeah,
literally kind of keeps us in this like sleep state. But what we're really trying to do is wake up from it, and it's hard to do. It's really hard to do. If you try to do it earnestly by yourself, it's difficult. You almost have to like find other people who share this goal of awakening.
yeah. Um, One thing that came to my mind, which we kind of discussed with another guest one time, was that I think there is blind faith and conscious faith. Like, and I define it this way. I think most people have blind faith, and I've seen this so many times, and every time I think about it, it's really amazes me. Like, I cannot even digest it. Like, so I myself, I was born in a Jewish family in a Islamic country back in Iran, and
Mm,
I I was exposed to both very heavily, and then I followed Christianity for many years, and so I was exposed to all of them. And one thing that's very interesting for me is that majority of people, and the number is really high, like I don't know, it's like 90% or something, but majority of people that are have a very strong faith in their own religion. Some of them, they might be even willing to kill you over that. They have never
mhm,
studied even their own sacred book completely once.
mhm,
This is really hilarious. Like, they're willing to fight over it, but most of their beliefs is just coming from other people and religious leaders. They have not even studied their own book once completely. That's the real problem here.
mhm,
And when I say conscious faith, I say if you go study with a questioning mind, and then you study as much as you can, anything you find, not even maybe not only your religion, different perspectives, different scriptures, and then you seek an experience. Another thing which I wanted to mention, not just like blind belief, like try to get an experience of that
yeah,
spirituality. And I can say that's much better, higher quality of faith. But I'd say even when you find something by deep studies and even some experiences, if you get to a state and say, oh, I got it now, I know everything, then you get stuck, because you should always be questioning. Like, we
mhm,
are not given our intellectual capability to just say, oh, I got it, that's it. The ultimate experience in many ways is not a belief or some conclusion. It's just like as clear as daylight.
yeah,
So in a lot of people, even with the spiritual experiences, they hallucinate. They think, okay, now I got that, now I know what's the ultimate truth. I got it, you know. And you were
mhm,
talking about awakening and whatever it means, and in Christianity. And I think, like, it's very funny. uh I don't know about other people, but I have a very good, vivid memory of even my own childhood. And when I remember a lot of moments in my childhood, I say, oh, I was so free internally, and I
mhm,
was living moment. I was much more joyful. My life was much more simple. And I think that was also a kind of being more awakened. And that's why Jesus said, bring the children to me. They are the closest to God and kingdom of God and whatever. So I think in many ways, just to put it very simply, the real spiritual progress also means to become less complicated and live more in the present, instead of desperately seeking external fulfillment. Because what is the root cause of majority of the issues, if not all of them in the world. It's just like desperately seeking happiness outside over whatever money, sex, other stuff. So I think spirituality, if it's not about making you self-fulfilled and less dependent on external world, then it's not really a spirituality
Yeah, no,
that you have.
I agree. Yeah, I agree with all of
Mhm.
that. I was thinking of Gurdjieff talks about essence um, versus personality, and essence is basically what we come into the world with, right? It's our mind, body. It encompasses our genetics, our skin color, our eye color. Everything is a part of our essence and nature that we come into the world with. And then as we go through life, which involves a lot of indoctrination and stuff, we acquire a personality to code all this, and character armor. Or another way of talking about that is the ego. We develop an ego, which kind of takes control of it. But the younger we are, like you said, when we're children, we're more just that essence. We haven't, pulled in all this ego and personality and stuff like that. So yeah, no, it's true. It's like trying to come back to a more essential state. Um, and there's something about, I believe that we have to go through this though. There's a reason why we came here. And it's an idea in Zoroastrianism, the idea that there's a pre-soul, and we made a conscious decision, a voluntary decision to come down here to help the father, because the father needs help in fighting against inertia, chaos, evil, all of this kind of stuff. And so, and you see it. It's even the idea comes through in Christianity with the idea of the fallen angel. Like an angel can't experience uh like it needs to experience the human um passions and feeling and stuff like that, so that the fallen angel has to descend into carnal existence in order to go through this experience, in order to then come back into and to be something higher and something even more independent. Which is another thing you touch on, is like the independence aspect of it, because church Christianity, distorted religions, like you say, they discourage the development in many instances. They discourage the development of independence and individuality and personal responsibility, which is actually something that needs to be unlocked and rebooted, and is a requirement. I mean, an individual has to have this to find that calling and that motivation to be able to make that inner journey, to take the time to say, it's more important for me to like direct my attention inwardly versus letting it always be out here and pulled along with everything, attached to everything, identified with everything and everyone that's like going on around me. I need to have the strength to like disconnect from all of that in some sense.
Mhm. Yeah. One of other things that you mentioned, which I like, is a lot of religious teachings, people taking it literally while it has a symbolic meaning. And for whatever reason, a lot of scriptures are written symbolically, especially a lot of things in Judaism or Judo Christianity. People think it's literally meaning that. I don't know why whoever wrote it or God or whatever decided to do it like that. But when you study mysticism, you see, wow, it didn't really mean what I thought it means. And I think a lot of issues start with that, the religious conflict and other stuff, when something can have many different meanings. And I keep saying this, that one of the biggest issues and causes of conflict and ignorance that we have is that we have so much confidence in our own knowing, and we think, okay, if I read it here, or if this religious leader said it means like this, then it should be like this. But it could have a hundreds of different types of meaning. You know, one story I like is about this Buddhist meditator monk, which used to read the Diamond Sutras of Buddha. And the story goes like this, that he was in his meditation and he went to like the first state of consciousness, the first heaven or whatever. And then he looked at the scripture and he thought it means totally different things. It was like, wow, now I have a different understanding of it. And then after some time, he goes to the second state and says, oh, it's even more different than what I thought previously. Then he keeps going like this till like the seventh state of like consciousness or whatever. And they say, wow, this is actually meaning totally different thing from what I understood. And it's a funny thing that a lot of scriptures are like that, and people just take it literally and they think, oh, we know what it means. Let's
Yeah.
just go and do things with whatever we understand. And it goes back to that whole thing that we just um, start making conclusions and we think, oh, we got it, we know the answer now. But like,
Hmm.
you know, the most enlightened people in the history and the spirituality, they were all like always had doubts and they didn't make conclusions unless they got to the ultimate experience and they see everything. I mean, why is it that in Hinduism or Sanatana Dharma, the people that get to that experience, they called rishis or seers? They don't call them philosophers, they call them seers, because this person sees the truth and then narrates it. And you know, we have all these Indian sciences, many different type of sciences, and each one of them was founded by a seer. Like even when we talk about like something as simple as Ayurveda or the system of medicine, there was a seer who wrote the original teachings of it. So it's different than objectively studying and trial and error and coming to a conclusion. When we talk about that state of seeing the ultimate truth, like that Buddhist meditator who got into that state and saw, oh wow, this means totally different. You know, like for example,
Hmm.
you read the book of the Genesis. It's like very symbolic. Like most people think, okay, there was some garden and God came and kicked Adam and Eve out of there, and this happened, and they ate an apple or whatever. But they don't ask themselves, maybe this is symbolic, maybe it means a different thing. And you know, like Yogananda in Autobiography of a Yogi, he even talks about it, and he says this is what it means actually.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's such a great point. So Gurdjieff said, I'm sorry, I'm talking a lot about Gurdjieff tonight, but he said that one of the problems with humanity is that we've lost the ability to not take everything literally. And so this is what's happened. Like you say, this is what's happened with the religious texts in the West. This is what's happened with the Bible for a lot of people. They just decided to take it literally, and it wasn't written. I don't believe that it was written for that reason. It wasn't written to be, here's what happened. It's not like a history. There's some history in it, but the history is woven with with lessons that don't necessarily have an answer, because that's not the purpose, to find an answer. The purpose of the scripture is to chew on it, is to read it and to ponder it. And like you said, like the story about the Buddhist, every time I come back to it, I see something different in it. That is such a to me a true representation of like how these texts are to be taken. Um, there was a time in my life where I was reading books like crazy when I was younger. Reading books, and I looked at the act of reading books like I'm absorbing all of this knowledge, and it's making me, it's making me smarter, or it's making me better. And there was a certain point where I realized that it wasn't making me I wasn't
Yeah,
becoming anything different or better as a result of just like reading through this stuff. And a lot of
yeah,
them are just bullshit. They're written by people who don't know, less than I do. So I've kind of come down to like really like what I call the super texts, right? which is like, the Bible, the Bhagavad Gita, and Tao Te Ching, and some others, and there's these books that were written for a different kind of purpose, that has been lost. But say, like, with, the Bhagavad Gita is a great example, because it's a little more approachable than the Bible. It's not quite as huge and thick, and as much of a commitment to it, but it's meant that you come back to this, that you read this, and then you go
Yeah.
practice for a while and do stuff and experience life, and then you come back and read it again, or read a different translation of it again, and you find more in it. I mean, some people get so frustrated about translations. This is a contentious thing with the Bible. It's like every Christian is like, no, this is the translation right here, and it's the only one you should read. Well, it's true. The Bible is like, there's so many translations going through different languages that, yeah, you could make the literary case that no one knows anything because no one knows what the original was. But at the same time, it's not the purpose to find out what this man, who wrote this originally and what they really meant. The aim of this is that you return to this, you return to the scripture after having experience, and you go through the process of like absorbing it again, and see what's different, see what's changed in you since the last time you've looked at it.
Yeah, for sure. Like you're talking about you were studying a lot of books in when you were younger, and actually this happened to me also when I started my journey. For many years, I was studying like crazy. I was studying so many books, but I never had like solid practice for many years that I have faith in it, that I can stick to it, and my real serious practice of spirituality started happening maybe about 12 years ago or something, which I started really practicing different meditations and whatever regularly. And one thing I noticed actually was very good reading all those books, and I was developing an understanding. And obviously, when you study something and you get an answer, 10 new questions appear. So it's an endless study if you just go with philosophy. Actually, it's been known to many people that a lot of philosophers went crazy because they were not practicing, and they were just studying. And there's no experience. Do you think just by thinking more you're gonna get the truth? It's not like that. So I
Yeah.
actually stopped studying for a few years at some point, and it's
Hmm.
like this is too much. They say they say if you load a ton of books on the back of a donkey is not going to make the donkey enlightened or something. Sometimes the studies also do that to you. It's just like your head getting heavy and you're not getting any closer to truth. Practicing is super important, and in many ways it doesn't even matter what practice you do. If you want to do like this meditation or that meditation or that mantra or whatever, just to do something regularly with dedication, and then studying a little bit, I think that's the way to go. And you mentioned some other things again about literally taking the meaning of those things. I think we can do many podcasts just on that thing of taking literally. I just like to mention it again because I keep trying to bring this awareness to people, to not just have blind faith, because
Hmm.
it's for our own best to get more clarity instead of just blindly following something which might not lead us to any truth or anywhere, or even lead us to somewhere which is harmful.
Hmm.
And those things with taking the literal meaning of it and like thinking that I know, and then different translations of the scriptures and whatever, and then thinking, oh, I know what it means now. I think that's the biggest issue, because just think about it. Even if the religious text that was written a few thousand years back is still intact, which is, if you think about it rationally and logically, is very unlikely. At least we can't say it's 100% pure like the day one. And even if it's true, still the meaning can be very different than what you give to it. And you conclude, I understand it now. And then in translation something might be changed. Even in English, some words have 5, 10 different meanings. The same word can have many different meanings. So I think this is what I am trying to also share with people, that just don't be sure about what you understand, because just being sure of something when it's not really truth, it can really damage you and really keep you in bondage, while something really higher and greater, a greater possibility might be available to you, but you think, no, I know it, I know it. And as I said, I dealt with a lot of different people, Christian, Jewish, Muslim, and so on. And I noticed this rigidness, narrow mindedness in a lot of people. And I'm not trying to change them, but I'm just sharing what I feel about it. Like, at one point, I remember I was discussing some things with a Muslim friend. I said, how are you sure that everything is written here is 100% accurate? And
Hmm.
again, like many people who just have blind faith, he was like, no, God has given this scripture and God will protect it. And there's a flaw to that kind of thinking, because if you say, okay, God is going to do this and then take care of everything for me and you, then God wouldn't create a word of duality that we need to decide about things, because we can decide to mess up something or distort something or lie to other people or deceive other people and so many other things.
No, absolutely. One of the things that I'm coming back to is what you were saying about faith in relation to all of this, and this connects with the idea of, oh, I'm trying to fill my head with knowledge by reading things and stuff like that. And when you actually start to uh, come into a stillness practice and silence and meditation, one of the first things you learn is that the mind, the brain, is like your worst enemy, right? It's like the mind, like, is just, we have this stream of associations that's like running constantly, and that effort to try and if not calm the mind, but at least not get caught up and carried away and the thoughts. And what we really need to have, the kind of experience that the kind of experience that I found that I was looking for, um, it led me increasingly to the solar plexus, lower story, and feeling, right? Feeling and the emotion and the heart. And with something like faith, the way that's currently understood in church Christianity is that faith is a mind thing, right? It's
Right.
like you're just going to decide to believe it. That's it. Just
Hmm.
decide to believe it. And you can do that, right? The mind can decide it's going to believe something, but the heart can't really decide to feel a certain thing, right? We can't really just decide to feel a certain way, which is always one of the, like Christianity says, love thy neighbor as thyself, is like one of the one of the main things that you're supposed to do. But no one knows how. It doesn't tell you how to do that, right? The Bible doesn't say how to do that, because no one can do that immediately. No one can just turn a switch on it. We recognize this in other ways all the time in society. We say love is blind, right? Why? Because you have no choice. If someone just loses his mind and finds out his wife was cheating on him, he goes crazy and kills him. When he goes to court, they say, "Oh, well, it was a crime of passion," right? They say that because they understand that when the passions, the heart takes hold, we're just pulled along. We can't control it. So there's something very significant about about having feeling involved with it. And I think, like in the Bible, when Christ was originally, when he was talking about faith, hope, and love, he talks about these three things together are very important. What he's talking about with faith is something to do with feeling. It's not, he wasn't saying you just have to believe this. You know? I mean, he didn't even in the Gospels itself, like, Jesus doesn't make that big of a deal about, "You have to believe that I came here," you know? It's like, the original meaning with faith has more to do with a feeling that develops within us when we
Mhm.
start to connect with like some higher capacities within us. When, it's like a sign, maybe it's a way of understanding this as it's a sign of the chakras like coming into alignment or something like that, that we're all like coming on the same on the same page. The mind is like easing back and moderating, and feeling is coming alive, and the lower story is helping to send energy back inward instead of spilling it all out on all around the world around us.
Yeah. Um, something very interesting came to my mind. I have never shared this before, but you were mentioning to make change, like so you can be loving your neighbor, for example, and just trying to say, okay, I'm just gonna love my neighbor from now on, and it's gonna happen. It's kind of it's not gonna work out, right? Inner transformation need to happen, which is the goal of spirituality and meditation, like to change your thoughts and feeling, inner purification. And I'm excited to share this story for first time. Actually, I remember when I used to go to church, and I had very good experiences actually with Christ and Christianity in so many ways. I was never um, rigid about just blindly believing everything they say, but I had good experiences, good connection to divine. And one thing that is very funny is that I was dealing with some sort of bad habits and addictions and things like that myself. And I was always feeling bad. In Christianity, especially in the letters later, I think it's Paul who says that, like, okay, when you accept Jesus and you repent and whatever, and then the Holy Spirit comes to you, it will change you, and your old nature dies and whatever. I was like, okay, I have enough faith. I go to church, I study the Bible, I do all these things. I still don't see the change really, and I'm putting a lot of effort. And even in the mainstream religion, there are some practices that are good, for making a change, like prayers and fasting and all those things. But I wasn't getting that result. I was like, why is it that every Sunday when I go to the church and we sing and pray, I feel energized, I feel the Holy Spirit, and uh, next day or in 2 days, I feel like it's gone. Like it was just a temporary energy and change of my emotions, whatever, music, prayers, and so on. So
Mm-hmm.
here's what I wanted to say. I struggled a lot of years just praying, oh Jesus, please help me change this habit. Why don't you do it? I don't understand, why don't you do it? You said I send you the Holy Spirit and all those things, and I keep asking this pastor and this guy and that guy, please pray for me. I want to change this habit or blah blah. And
Mm-hmm.
then it never worked out. For many years, it never worked out. And then I came to read a book on psychology and changing habits and whatever. Very practical approach to it. And within a very short time, I think within 1-2 months, I was able to change myself. I was like, um, okay, I was expecting Jesus and the Holy Spirit or whatever you call it to transform me, but like by doing the right thing, very simple technique helped me to change it. So that really made me question some things. And that brings it to that whole important thing, which I want to say, that spirituality is a process of awakening to new layers of your unconscious and knowing yourself better and being able to control your energies and emotions and whatever. And the reason I love some paths like yoga and Buddhism is because they are almost like a science. They
Mm-hmm.
just give you
Oh yeah.
technique. They say, okay, you do this, you do this, you sit like this, you breathe like this, you put your attention here and there, and just stick to these rules and whatever, and practice it, and gradually you will get to that state of self mastery or higher consciousness and whatever. That's what's really, for me especially, maybe not for everybody, for me that's very valuable, to have a path which is like almost like science that tells you
Mm-hmm.
if you do X and Y and Z, you will get to this. So that's what I wanted to add. What do you think about that?
Oh, I really resonate with a lot of the things that you said there. You know, like I said, I went through a long period myself, um, working with I worked with a group that practiced ceremonial magic, and it was like kind of a similar thing. It's like always wanted this like kind of like transformation, and then when I'm like working with them, it's like, oh, I for a little while I feel like, oh yeah, I did something, but it didn't last. It never lasts. And as far as like the real changes that I wanted, that I knew I needed to make, like my diet and my drinking habits and stuff, which I knew somewhere, I knew that this was killing me. Things that are killing me, right, are going to shorten my life, and I definitely need to like stop it. And I was just unable to like make these changes. And when I finally just settled down, and it was because I had a good teacher who basically just told me, you just need to, yeah, you really need to like do it like every day, and you know, like you're saying, do it like this, you know, stillness and breathe in this way. And you just, you know, you do that for a while, and then it's like some other, like, you know, capacity, it's like you start to get some guidance in, and you kind of know what to do next, what to try next. I'm going to adjust my sitting like this. I'm going to do it at a different time. I'm going to try a different, you know, breathing, or a different, you know, a different mantra I'm going to say to myself while I'm breathing. And suddenly it's like you're the driver, instead of being driven around all the time. And that real, that um I'm also a believer that we have like this, like a holy guardian angel, or what the Greeks called the daimon, or this higher consciousness within us, this higher I within us, that just like peeks out. It just like peeks out every once in a while, you know. If I try and look at it directly and see it directly, it's like shy, and it like, you know, it like goes away. But in these moments of like silence and stillness, there will just be this arising of an observer or a watcher. And I
Mm,
think it's something it's referenced in all of the scriptures, make references
sure.
in different ways to this other um, perception that can rise within us. And that's something that fuels like, or something rather, that the idea of faith is like connected with that, my feeling, and this arising of some higher capacity within me. I don't have to force myself to believe that, you know, almighty creator did this and this, and on the seventh day he rested, and, you know, all this really specific stuff, you know. I think, and you touched on this too, there's a real tendency to personify everything, and to quantify everything, and to take this idea of God, or a creator, or an absolute, and say, well, it's like, but it's a relationship like any other. I'm going to do stuff for him. I'm going to pray for him. He's going to do stuff for me in return, to humanize it. But just like all of our human relationships are like that, right? You do something for someone, they do something back for you. If you don't like what they did, then you get mad, you know. Um, and 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 really, it's not like that at all. This whole idea of God or an absolute, it's tied in with this idea of what we were talking about in the beginning, about an eternal order of the cosmos, an order that descends from this source way beyond anything that we're familiar with, and somehow ends up, you know, a cause. There's like a first primal cause of everything, and it descends down into us. And in that sense, we're really here on planet Earth. We're kind of really cut off from
Mm,
that. We're very far away from it, but we have this little essence of it, this little spark of it that we have within us. And one of the things that we're trying to do in these practices is fan that flame and feed that flame by, again, when we come back to that open state of question, that we receive like some higher kind of nourishment as a result of that, that sort of feeds that flame, and it
mm,
and it starts to grow.
yeah.
So
So
in your experience, so were you what specific tradition were you raised in? Like, you were in Iran?
yeah, I
You
was
grew up?
born in a Jewish family. Yeah,
Okay, okay.
yeah.
And
I
was there I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, no, go ahead.
I was just going to ask. So, was that within your experience there? And you described how there's different, there's a lot of rigidness around you that you saw. Did you find opportunities within that tradition that kind of pointed to like some like more esoteric things that stayed with you over time?
Not really, not at all. I don't like to comment on religions because I don't want to upset people. But like, I think
Right.
in Judaism and Islam specifically, these two, it's like almost zero experience of real spirituality. At least, unless for some people might be following, I don't know, different sort of teacher or tradition, or they have it in themselves. But no,
Yeah.
my first real spiritual experiences started when I started reading the New Testament, and it really touched me. And it was a start; it was not an end to it. But then at the same time, also I got deeply into yogic knowledge and Buddhism and things like that, which I mentioned. And then from there, I started just studying and experiencing and questioning, and I'm still growing. One thing you mentioned, which has been some of my recent inner experiences, which is very hard to explain um, in terms of understanding God, universe, whatever. I really felt recently that the whole idea of God, no matter who explains it, also in some ways limiting. I feel like really, if you experience the universe, whatever you call God, without your mind, it's like the whole universe, visible or invisible, is that. I don't want to even call it God. And that universe, that reality, can be realized within you or within somebody else, and universe can express that divinity, that higher expression, through endless things. So God can be a man, God can be an animal, God can be some sort of invisible force, could be light or whatever. Why limit it? Because if you limit it, then you actually don't believe in God in some ways, because you cannot
Mm-hmm.
limit God and say God is only like this. So
Right.
it's really everything. It can express it in everything. And there is no limitation. Universe awakened in Buddha in one way and in Jesus in another way. So it could awaken in you also. I don't think there's any limitation if you are really into it. To For you also, you can become a Buddha, a Siddha, or like the most evolved avatar or whatever, if you really connect to that part of yourself and allow universe to express that divinity through you. So that's what thing I wanted to add. But as the
Yeah.
last thing I wanted to discuss, in some way, everything that we do, and for everybody else that they might not even be religious or spiritual, it's about, you know happiness, the pursuit of happiness. And whatever we do it just to be more satisfied and happy. And I wanted to ask you, what do you think all of these spiritual things and meditation and whatever else, how can it be translated to happiness for average person who listens to this to take advantage of it and like apply it to their life?
Man, that's a great question. So, I think one of the things we find, and this might even be in this might be in Buddha's Four Noble Truths or something. But yeah, happiness always leads to sorrow, right? It always leads to a disappointment where the happiness ends when we experience happiness just at the level of ego, right? Just at the level of our personality and our the appetites, right? Our appetites and desires lead us towards things that we think we're going to get happy from. Like, I need to be with that person and I'll be happy, or I need to have,
Mm.
one more beer and I'll be happy, or I need to have that, that record or whatever, and then I'll be happy. And we get things that our desires and our appetites like lead us towards. It makes us happy for a little while, but then but then it's gone. It doesn't last. And so there's something in us that maybe hungers in a different way. It hungers for something that's more substantial and uh, more permanent. And one of the keys that I think of to this, that it's because we've been talking about it, is when Christ talks about faith, hope, and love. These three. We talked about faith. Hope has to do with the wish, the wish, or for something higher, maybe some more permanence. And then love has to do with this other capacity within us. And I think Christ even talks about, like, there's different kinds of loves, and I think Thomas Aquinas, like, talked about it too. But basically, there's just like the kind of love where we quantify it with other people, right? And and we all know what that all been through life. We know how that goes. It's rocky. It's rocky and often leads to sadness and disappointment, and impermanence. But then there's like a higher kind of love, which agape is what that's called in the
Hmm.
scriptures. But people still will take it they take it in a totally human form. They say it's just for God, and they've humanized the idea of God so much, personified God so much, that they look at it that way. And it's like, love God, just love God. And it to a child, it doesn't make any sense that I have to turn on love for something that I don't even know what that means. It doesn't make sense. But what it could mean is that through the result of this sort of silence and stillness practice that we've been talking about, is that a sense of love develops within us. And for me, it's often around associated with the solar plexus. um,
Hmm.
that there's a experience of love that can arise within us, but is not connected with any person or
Hmm.
entity or anything. There's and to me, that is um what that love with a capital L is referring to in there. And that is in the direction of like a kind of like happiness that
Yeah.
doesn't dissipate, doesn't evaporate in the same way. You're not none of us are like 100% all the time. None of us are just on like constantly, but this kind of experience. And again, you've said this several times, and it's so true. You have to like you can't believe anything based on what someone else is telling you or what you've read. You have to find your own experience, right? You have to like base what you're doing on your experience. And when you've had these kind of higher experiences, then that sort of stays with you, because then you know what's possible. You have a sense of what's really possible. And in my experience, that doesn't really leave you.
Hmm. Yeah. Nice. No, I like the way that you put it and the way that you connect it to love, because in so many traditions, it's also been stated, including Sufism and the path of Bhakti Yoga, that when you get to that
Hmm.
highest state of love, which is your real nature, that energy, that vibration of love, then you become kind of needless from external happiness. And well, love is known to be the highest vibration in some ways that you can experience. So when you connect to that love within yourself, then the real transformation can happen, not by a love that is temporary triggered and is dependent on someone or something, but also even some of the modern studies in psychology also, they mention that um, one of the few things that give you lasting happiness is to be in some state of love and like some dedication to something that creates that state in you. So for some people might be a great cause, or for some people could be God or whatever, but that's great. Yeah, I mean, love is a very simple but might not be easy way to achieve that satisfaction, and then stop being desperate about things to do to extract some happiness from here and there. Yeah, and with
Hmm.
that, we can end this session. And unless if you have anything you want to add.
My final thought I'm going to add is when you mentioned Sufism and love, I thought of Rumi, and I've read some of his poetry, and he has his poems, like a lot of them. It's like in one sense, it's a love poem on the surface, and someone can, like, just take it as a love poem, but it's also there. It's also about this spiritual process, that I think we've been talking about a lot on here. This process of inner transformation, that, like, love is like the greatest metaphor, uh, to discuss, to be able to articulate these ideas in a way that is not completely direct. Because again, it's like we got to kind of like trick ourselves and not directly like get things, because something in the mind like will like seize on it and have a problem with it and screw it all up. But if we can like kind of sneak in these influences past the character armor guardian, then it might be something um that can transform us.
Cool. Cool. Okay, thank you very much, Paul. Maybe next time we can do one more session later. I appreciate it.